Yeah, so I mean, I think, look, it's not that there's a right or wrong answer about this, but I think that is one of the premises of what happens here. So let me backtrack. Let's go to mental health. Tell me some mental health stresses that people face. Some specific mental health stresses that people have.
Like success
Like-
in career, like work?
No, I'm sorry, you're right. Give me like some actual mental health conditions.
Anxiety, like that?
Like, okay,
Anxiety,
so
depression.
anxiety, depression, anything else? Anxiety, depression, two big ones.
Self-esteem.
Levels of self-esteem.
Burnout,
What do you mean by burnout?
turmoil,
Tell me more.
you feel yourself weak, you don't want to do anything.
Okay. So often if you're feeling weak, you don't want to do anything, that's often an indicator of, and this could be an indicator of lots of things, but it's often associated with depression, right? You know, there's that sense of not wanting to get out of bed. So when a lot of the survey research that you guys are looking at, they ask questions like, do you feel so down that you don't want to get out of bed in the morning? Do you feel that so much is happening around you that you don't know how to contend with everything happening? So all these things often can be, well, maybe not that one, but the thing about not getting out of bed is often associated with depression. But are there other more genetically,
Schizophrenia.
so schizophrenia is one of the big
Bipolar?
bipolar disorders,
Mood disorders.
schizophrenia, some very specific types of mood disorders that occur. There's growing evidence about ADHD, growing evidence about learning, what are often called oh my gosh, I forgot what they're called. It's a specific kind of disorder having to do with the mechanisms by which we can focus, and we focus attention and are able to learn. ADHD, attention deficit disorder.
Is that like the cognitive learning, or is that?
Yeah, there's a very specific word for it, and we'll figure it out next week. But so if you go to either extreme, I think what we're going to try to do from a public health standpoint is do a couple of things. If you're a psychiatrist or a clinical psychologist, what do you think you're primarily interested in? You're a psychiatrist. You're
Making money.
besides making money.
Patients. Caring for a patient.
Yeah, you're probably worried about the individual. You're probably more focused on dealing with issues as they impact an individual. Sociologists, clearly, that's not where we're coming from, because we tend to associate mental health outcomes much more with social phenomena. And that's where the tie-in is with sociology and public health. That's why there's a whole branch of sociology called medical sociology. That's why we have a bachelor's degree in public health housed in sociology. Because when you take a public health standpoint, you are, of course you're worried about individuals, but you're much more concerned about the types of social forces that impact people's mental health outcomes. Now, one of the points that is raised in the book, which is a good one, it is very obvious how it is that social factors influence physical health. Can you think of some examples of how social factors impact our physical health?
I mean, if you live, typically if lower income, you're surrounded by a lot more fast food restaurants than, organic or natural grown stores.
Yeah.
So that often leads to obesity, and that has all sorts of consequences.
That's a really important one in terms of physical health. There's,
Oh, you're more likely to live in like an old crappy house with maybe with lead paint and what's that other thing that the lead paint and or like contaminants in your plumbing, in your piping and stuff for the water, or maybe the water itself is coming from a bad source like Flint, Michigan, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, without question, those are big ones. Yeah. Well, before you move on, so there's kind of two that we're starting to talk about. So food issues, but then I think in this sense it's sort of like environmental issues. And on both counts, there's compelling research showing that poor Americans, low-income Americans, have less access to healthy, quality food, right? I mean, and that's urban geographers love doing this kind of stuff. They use GIS, and they clearly show, I mean, right? When was the last time you went in the hood? When was the last time any of you went in the hood in the first place? But having that said, when was the last time you went in the hood and found like Jason's
Go to buy
Deli?
drugs.
What's that? When was the last time you went in the hood and you found Jason's Deli, right? You know.
Or Starbucks.
Or Starbucks, right? Starbucks. But you know, when was the last time you went in the hood and found, you know, high cholesterol, fried, fatty foods, inexpensive, high fried, fatty foods, like McDonald's, right? There's a McDonald's in every poor neighborhood in America. What?
No, just remember growing up, there was this McDonald's. It's off of 35 West Washington. Just thinking of it.
Right? I'll tell you what, I grew up in a different part of the United States, a very poor part of St. Louis, right? You know, I grew up in a largely African American area, and I actually grew up 2 miles from Ferguson. Well, not my high school years. And what was available on every corner was what we called a chop suey, right? These hole-in-the-wall Chinese places that you couldn't even go inside and eat. They were barred, and they just, right? You just ordered, it was all to go. Everything was to go. And can you imagine just the amount of salt and sodium and chemicals that are in that food? It tastes good, right? I ate me some noodles, don't get me wrong, but there's nothing healthy about that. The other thing is what Mike brings up is the idea of environmental degradation. Poor Americans are generally just closer in proximity to toxic waste. They're closer to dirt,
Power lines.
power lines, you name it, you know, poor Americans. And this does also include Americans living in rural parts, you know, poor white Americans. It includes Americans living on Native American reservations, tend to be closer to landfills. Who's the person that's gonna build a landfill? What's gonna happen when you try to build a landfill and put it in the Dominion, next to the Dominion? What's gonna happen?
It's not get blocked
Can't
real
get it
fast.
going.
There's gonna be such an outcry from those rich white folks and Mexican nationals that you're just not going to have that landfill put outside of the Dominion. Way too much political muscle. So thinking, okay, and you had a third thing you were gonna bring up, Cole?
Oh, no, it was, Michael reminded me of it, it's, kind of just, neighborhood disorders, so, you know, we're talking about the actual environment, but environment, I guess socially speaking, you know, cause if it's a neighborhood that's involved with gangs, or, like you said, everyone's close together, so whether you like it or not, you might hear the baby in the house next to you crying, or the couple fighting, and then all of a sudden, it could be late at night, so that can start having an impact on your sleep, so all of a sudden, you're not getting enough sleep, and that can have a physical
For sure,
consequence.
absolutely. So then, if we think about all these correlates, right, all these things that are associated with poor or better, or, you know, poor physical health, one of the things that we have to think about to move away from being psychiatrists and start thinking more like public health experts or like medical sociologists is that these same types of macro level, what are often called structural forces, also impact mental health. So can you think about the types of things that might negatively impact mental health outcomes amongst American populations from a macro level? Just like we discussed things that impact our physical health, what kind of things might impact our mental health?
Oh, so you're saying poor people shouldn't get to have guns? Two and two. I'm just
Was that
kidding. I'm
supposed to
just
be-
being a smart aleck.
Okay, it's